Welcome to Dealmaker Catalyst, and I'm your host, Jason Seward. Today's guest is someone who has quietly built influence in a corner of real estate most investors never fully understand. Eddie Speed has been investing in mortgage notes for over 4 decades. While most investors chase properties, Eddie built his career becoming the lender, buying and creating notes backed by real estate and generating cash flow from the debt itself. Over the course of his career, he's been involved with over 50,000 note transactions and helped educate thousands of investors through the platform he founded, Note School. His expertise spans performing and non-performing notes, seller financing, and creative deal structuring. If you've ever wondered what it really looks like to be the bank instead of the landlord, this conversation will challenge how you think about cash flow, leverage, and risk. Eddie, welcome to the show.
How are you?
I'm doing great. This is an honor and a privilege. I heard a lot about you through the Dealmaker Network, and I'm very honored to be able to sit down and ask you a few questions. So I'm ready to get this kicked off.
Well, I'm a giant fan of Dealmaker, and Jason, I'm so glad to see you doing this podcast. So I'm honored to be here.
So Eddie, kind of as I've read that intro, you've been at this for over 40 years, and the only thing I've done for over 40 years is breathe. I'm 44 years old, so I've got nothing that I've done that long. And a lot of our listeners are going to kind of be in that same boat where we could go down so many rabbit holes on the topic of note investing, and a lot of folks are just going to get cross-eyed and check out. What I want to do today is really dial in at a high level of what it is, kind of define it for folks and leave them, if they're hungry for more, some resources to go from there. So
Sure.
With that, I'm going to kind of kick it off, Eddie, with a simple question. What drew you into the world of note investing over 40 years ago?
It was an accident. I was living in Mississippi, where I'm from, and I met a guy who later became my father-in-law, and I've been married to that girl now for 43 years. But
All
I
right.
met a guy that that got me started in this business, and that was my father. He later became my father-in-law, and he really mentored me and coached me in the business. He would have been in Dealmaker, right? He was a fireman and owned trailer parks and had rent houses and built houses and bought foreclosures and all of that. So he started out as a real estate guy, but the market changed. In 1980, when I started with him in the business, he had already shifted. Because of inflation, he figured out he could make more money with notes than he could with rental properties, because rental property, the expenses kept going up. So he was a guy that didn't get to read a lot of books about it or listen to podcasts. He just had to figure it out. And he introduced me to the business, and I was young and didn't know anything. And I look back and I still think about that young Eddie Speed at 20 years old, and I have a heart for that person who may not be 20, maybe they're 30, maybe they're 50, maybe they're 70. But I have a heart for the fact that, that I had to learn enough to get started and know that I wasn't going to know everything in order to go do something. How do you get started? And I got started with this gentleman, Mr. Shoemake.
Yep. Well, I think this is let's define what when you say note investing, define that in its simplest form for me.
Well, basically, we become the bank. Everybody, you're a lender, so you know this. Everybody probably on this podcast has been to the title company and bought a piece of property where they got a loan. And you went down to the bank and you went to the title company or the lawyer's office and you signed something that said you're going to pay back the money. And it was probably called a note. And it said how much you owed, what the interest rate was, what the monthly payment was, how long it's payable, blah, blah, blah. You signed a note. Now, it was a real estate deal, so it was secured by a piece of property. God forbid you didn't pay, right? But you signed a note. Well, that means that you're going to pay the bank back every month. And so those notes are saleable. In fact, pretty much everybody on this podcast has gotten a letter at some point that says your loan's been sold, right? So that's what I do is I go in and buy somebody's note, and then I become the bank. I'm not the landlord. I don't own the property. I own the note. And right now, Jason, I'm under the premise that people are having a hard time trying to figure out what to do in real estate. Multifamily's not very good. Rent houses are not making near the money they used to make. Fix and flip has certainly changed, right? And the margins are shrinking in that. And I think that notes are probably top the list of the best things because of market timing. Notes probably top the list of some of the best things you can do. I'd rather be the bank than a landlord.
Yeah. So from a mechanical standpoint, lay out what that looks like. So you just laid out, kind of defined it perfectly. The bank, they issue a note. Now they're holding a note, and the borrower is paying them back monthly payments, principal and interest, typical of some type of structure. When you come in and look at that, so now you're looking at notes to purchase. What are you analyzing? Kind of what are the top 3 underwriting metrics you're looking at?
I look first and foremost is I like to buy notes on a decent piece of property. I don't buy notes on crappy property, right? That has proven to me over a long period of time to be an unstable factor in the deal. So I don't buy notes on crappy property. I want to check yes in the blank that I believe that borrower, the guy that owes me the money, that looking forward, that there's a very high percent chance he's going to be able to continue to pay me timely in the future on that note. I think he's going to pay. Now, we could get down into everything that you look at to do that, but I want to leave it at least a high level. Yep. That there is a risk blueprint that we can clearly lay out to people that leads me to checking yes in that blank. I think they'll continue to pay. I've eliminated one variable, which is people don't want to live in a crappy property. I just tell you from experience. So I've eliminated crappy properties, like good neighborhoods, good properties. Okay. And now I look at all the things and I think they're going to pay good. Right. And then I look at it and think, here's what at the end of the day, like you have an audience full of somebody that either owns rentals, has thought about rentals, or knows somebody that has rentals. Everybody has some concept of rentals. The landlord nets his money last, Jason. He figures out how much he's going to make after everybody else gets paid. The bank, the insurance company, the tax, paid the taxes, the plumber, the roofing, the redoing it after the tenant tears it up. All of those people get paid, and then the landlord gets what's left. Guess what money I get every month as the bank? I get the first money.
The first money, right? Yeah. Yep. So what you're obviously you've kind of what you've defined. So I'm for folks listening, I'm trying to somewhat make the analogy to buying a property, right? Buying a rental property. It's not the same thing, but it sounds like you're starting with some type of a buy box. So you're looking at a certain type of property in the right neighborhood with the right borrower metrics, whatever they are. So you kind of define your buy box, and that's what you're going to go after. So how do you then source those deals? If you're buying property, you're going to the MLS, wholesalers, things like that. How are you guys sourcing them in this field?
So I've been buying notes for 45 years, and I've had note school for 25 years. Okay, and what I found out was I could have a school and teach you everything. I could do a brain dump and give you everything that I've ever learned about buying notes. And the odds are, Jason, you would call me back and say, Eddie, can you help me find a note?
Right.
And so so one of the critical things I've done is I built a marketplace. Jason, you know this. I'm very, very well known in the seller finance world. Right? I bought 50,000 seller finance notes, probably 2,000 plus portfolios. You could call in your neighborhood and find somebody that's carried 200 notes and said, "Have you ever heard of a guy named Eddie Speed?" "Oh yeah, he's a note guy over in Texas. Buys notes all over the country." Right? We're that brand.
Right.
And so I have a seat at the table in the industry that becomes very efficient for our students to benefit from that. I've developed, think in terms of the Lexus pre-owned checklist, right? We've got the checklist that we put a note through that all of a sudden you then can have some confidence that there's been some very clear, solid due diligence done before you even start your due diligence. You know there's been a checklist done by people that's got a long track record of doing it. That knocks down the biggest barrier to people having success in the business. If I can help them find a good note and there's been some solid due diligence that's already been done on it. Does that make sense?
It does. And again, kind of sticking with that analogy, it's the same advice I would give to somebody that's trying to start out buying property is find the right mentor, find the right mastermind, program, coach, whatever you want to call it. That's not a guru, that actually has experience like yourself, that you can kind of hitch to that wagon and really, escalate and pour gas on the idea that you have in note investing. So I love that. And it makes perfect sense.
I
And
built the school for that reason.
yeah,
I was trying to do business with people, but I couldn't give them enough of a brain dump without a school so that they could confidently go do business with me. So I built a school for the purpose of trying to figure out how to do business with my clients.
yeah, I like that. And I think this is such a niche product or a niche idea within the real estate world. I don't know that you certainly started out, like you mentioned, in the 1980, kind of alone, but you have somebody to kind of hold your hand to get going. Like, this is not something you just hear a few podcasts and figure it out on your own. That's what I'm hearing.
If there wouldn't have been a Mr. Shoemake, there would have never been an Eddie Speed note guy that you would have ever heard of. That is 100%.
Gotcha. All right, so let's go back to the mechanics of it just a little bit. And I don't want to get too deep and have people check out, but let's go back. You find one, you source it through whatever. You've got a bunch of different ways of sourcing and marketing and whatnot. You find a note that fits your buy box, and let's say it's a loan for $200,000, and it is earning whatever percent rate that you want to put on it on a 30-year note. What mechanically is the process then? Are you trying to buy that at some type of a discount? What is the method from that point on? Help folks understand that.
Yeah, so most notes I buy at a discount, but it doesn't have to be discounted, right? Or if a note has 10% interest on the note, I don't, there might not be any reason to discount the note, right? And so if you buy a note, you're entitled to collect all of the principal and all of the interest. It doesn't matter what you paid for it. I could buy $1,000 note for $500, and I'm still entitled to collect $1,000 plus the interest on that. So it doesn't matter what I paid for the note as far as legally being able to collect back what is owed. And so the price of the note, you're right. That's going to get down into some mechanics that, kind of would be a distraction to, people start really. You and I want people to leave today and go like, notes could do a lot for me, right? It's what I think today is like what notes do for you and not how to do every little piece of it to start with. It's like what you can accomplish. Note school is full of burnout landlords. It's full of them, right? You want to know why? Because in 2018, their rent house, before they paid the bank, probably made about 8% a year. That's pretty decent money. Plus the house went up in value. So they put up with tenants and toilets, right? Deal makers slam full of them. I know. I see all the posts all the time, right? Now all of a sudden the same house makes 4%. And it's because of inflation. What happened, what went wrong was inflation. Inflation went up way more than rents went up. And that changed the economics of rentals. And listen, I'm not confused. I'm on the Deal Maker podcast. So what I'm saying, some of the people listening are going to like, he don't know what he's talking about. But you know what? I know thousands of landlords, and I know that when I show them the economics of seller financing the same house that they rent, their income's going to go up. Net income's going to go up about 2.5 times. That I know to be a truth. That's pretty crazy, but it's true.
What is so a big piece of this has to be funding the notes, like the capital to take these notes down. Again, buying real estate, there's all kinds of methods. You can use cash, you can use other people's money, loans, yourself to purchase this. Give us just kind of a high level overview of how these are structured from a financing standpoint.
So that is, a lot of people have that little voice in their head and they say, I can't do this because they don't have $500,000 in their bank account. They instantly think I can't do this. And as you said, pretty much everybody with a driver's license has some concept of a rent house and that you could borrow money at the bank, or somebody like you or a lender of some kind, right? If you can do it to a piece of real estate, you could do it to a note. And you know this, Jason, because you're a big-time hard money lender. And you know that you don't need $4 million in your checking account to go fund notes, to go fund hard money loans like you do every month. Right? I mean, we know this.
What I'm hearing is,
I built a school. I
Yeah.
built a school because people don't know that. And when you show them that, they're like, oh my gosh, I just had no idea.
Yeah, and I'm hearing you talk, and I'm thinking, there are many scalable ways to do this from what I'm hearing. I mean, I can still use other people's money. I mean, through whether it's a fund or whatever model to raise capital, pay them a fixed return, and then make a spread on that from buying these notes. I mean, there's other ways to do that. So
Listen, do you think I bought 50,000 notes with the money in my wallet?
absolutely not. Yeah.
So I just simply teach people proven techniques. That's an example with training and as you said, real training from people that have really done it and do it, right? Like I'm a very active note buyer, so I'm not some guy that has a school and used to do this 20 years ago but don't do it. Like I'm very active note buyer. And I just teach them what we do every day or different techniques and how we built retirement accounts and used other people's money in various ways. So when you teach them that, it's like you hear the biggest sigh in the world because people want to be the bank. You just have to show them some processes of how they can be the bank, meaning they don't need all the money in their checking account.
Yeah. When people hear this, the first thing I know a lot of think that's coming to a lot of folks' minds are, well, all right, now if you're the bank and you're buying $50,000 or 50,000 notes over a long period of time, but certainly there's going to be some defaults. Certainly there's going to be some foreclosures. How do you, I mean, you can't mitigate against all of that risk, but at some point you're going to be taking properties back. So part of the system, I would imagine, is having a plan in place to market those properties and get them off the books as quick as possible, correct?
Well, listen, 45 years in this business, how we would have sold a foreclosed property even 10 years ago versus today, it's getting rid of foreclosure properties today with all the technology and all the platforms and all the processes. That is not even close to the biggest barrier in the business.
Okay.
What you want to have is a cushion factor, Jason.
Yep.
Let's talk about the reality of a cushion factor. So let's take each of our listeners that are listening today. They're going to ask themselves a question. What is my house worth? Somebody's going to go, oh, my house is worth 400,000. Somebody else says my house is worth $1 million. Somebody else says my house is 175,000. Whatever that is. Do you owe the bank the same amount of money that your house is worth? Or do you owe the bank less than what your house is worth?
Hopefully less.
Okay. If that's yes, and that's going to be true a very high percentage of the time.
Yep.
And what Jason, what you just saw is that bank has a cushion. That bank is owed less money than what the property's worth. They don't want you to default. But if you did, they're probably going to be okay too.
Yep.
And so the number one question, the fear question, that little, when that voice gets a little high and people are a little scared, and the answer is, I don't want something bad to happen with these notes, but if it does, I'm usually okay.
Yeah. And I ask that question because that's what we get asked a lot in our space, the lending space, is aren't you worried about foreclosure? We've had foreclosures. It's you lend in a way that there's enough cushion and enough spread, whatever you want to call it, where if you have to take this back, oftentimes it can be more profitable than if that loan had paid off. Now you don't want to get into that business for that reason, but but I think you define that very well where folks can understand that there's ways to mitigate. Yes, administratively, it's a headache if you have to take a property back, but you put processes in place, do so in a way where you're still money ahead. And
we teach an investing framework so that you don't wake up and go like, oh God, I never thought about that. We have a framework in how we do it. And so that cushion factor, which is what you're owed as the bank compared to what the property's worth, that cushion factor is a big mechanism. And let me take one more objection off the table. Okay. If you buy a loan from us, there's virtually 100% chance that we're going to say you need to have it at a loan servicer. By the way, we'll connect you with a loan servicer. We don't want you servicing the loan yourself because you may not know what's required of you. You may not know what the government or the IRS or some regulatory, go put it with somebody that's a licensed servicer that knows what they are obligated to do. And the second thing is, I control all the decisions, meaning if we got to foreclose, I get to decide when that is. But the truth of the matter is the servicer actually does the work. So it's in terms of the same thing as I take my truck and have the oil changed, and I don't have to be an expert in knowing every detail about changing the oil in my truck to make sure that I knew it got done correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it's, again, I can keep making analogies to our property owners, our landlords out there that you oftentimes once you build up and you start scaling, you pay a property manager. You kind of turn over those responsibilities to them to take that, to get it in a more professional setting and to take it out of your bandwidth. You don't need to handle it. Sounds like what I'm hearing there, similar to.
I would tell you this, that compared to the decisions that somebody that owns the rental, even if they have a third-party property manager, the decisions they have to make and be involved in, you will be involved in 1/10 of that if you have a loan at a loan servicer.
Yeah.
Like if you're used to have the property manager, you got to kind of monitor them or they think
That's true.
they make a spiff on when they call the plumber, they make a little spiff on that. Don't be deceived about that. I guarantee you they're making money to call that vendor, right?
Yep.
But here's the thing about it. Your loan servicer is not making a spiff on you, and they eliminate a lot of heavy management decisions that you just don't have to fret about it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, the longer we talk, the more I think the biggest takeaway from our conversation as we kind of start moving towards the tail end of this is you're not going to walk away from this conversation and go buy a note. You're not going to do it. Like you don't know the mechanics of it and you need to be taught that. And we're sitting here right now, everybody listening. I hope you got a pen and a pad or you come back and re-listen, but we have in front of us really one of the top in the nation that's doing this and teaching this and still continuing to teach it. Eddie, I would imagine at this point in your life and your career, with all the success you've had, you don't have to do this anymore. You don't need to teach people how to do this anymore. So now you're doing, I mean, obviously there's a price to pay for everything, but you're doing this to leave a legacy and teach people another way to view this stuff. So um, I kind of want to start moving towards the back end of this with you talking about what people can expect if they dig deeper and are interested in your school and your teachings.
Well, I think today you did a great job, Jason, of saying, why would you want to own notes? You did a really good job today of being clear about what benefits notes have. It takes less time, it's less aggravating, and you make more cash flow. Like, those are three pretty good things, right? So the second thing would be like, okay, if I like the idea, then what kind of a starter series, what kind of training wheels, Eddie, can you give us so that we could get started? And there's a couple of ways to do that. We have a good podcast called Note School TV. It's on YouTube.
Okay.
And the reason it's good, and you're going to see people from Dealmaker that are members that are on that podcast, is it's their before and after story. Let me just tell you, a lot of them start out with rentals, and I was pulling my hair out, and then they're telling their after story where I own notes, and I get to go spend time with my grandkids, and I'm getting way better income, cash flow. I converted my rentals to seller financing. Eddie helped me with that process. Blah blah blah. It's going to be that story. The before. This is what my life was before notes, and here's what my life's like after notes. That podcast is pretty good at that. The second thing is I'm going to actually give you a starter training series, a series of trainings that are going to lead you to the confidence you need to get started. And that's going to be noteschool.com. This is a little long, but it's worth writing down. Noteschool.com/catalyst starter. The starter series, Catalyst, of course, saying that we've designed something for your audience, and that's a good way for somebody to start saying answer the how-to questions.
And for folks trying to jot it down and figure out how to spell catalyst and / back, we'll have the link in the show notes. So just follow that link, and that's a great resource. Eddie, I do appreciate you providing that for the audience, because I think, I mean, it's like anything else. This is a seed being planted, hopefully, in a lot of folks' brain, just to maybe pique some curiosity, maybe lead you down a path you haven't really heard of or thought much about, that can turn in and evolve to something else. And I like to compare things to my own experience. The only reason I'm in the hard money lending space is because I was encouraged to start lending my own capital, which wasn't a lot. I was doing a couple loans at a time through my self-directed account. That led me to a mentor that was doing this at a much bigger scale as a fund model, which led me down the education path and the mentorship that evolved into what I'm doing now. So that I am the world's worst at shiny object syndrome. So I'm going to be following these resources and probably head down another path. But that's all we're trying to do here, is just to encourage folks to think differently about another option out there. So, yep. And Eddie, what I'd like to do, what we do with every guest, is kind of a little bit of a rapid fire to wrap things up. Okay. So I'm going to ask you 4 or 5 questions, kind of related to what our topics are, but also just life in general. So if you're ready, we'll go through those.
Let's do it.
All right. What principle or quote has most shaped the way you think about money, leverage, and life over the past 40 years?
Oh, that's a great one. I would say understanding being the bank, and understanding that there's a reason that they call compound interest the eighth wonder of the world.
I love it. We don't need to elaborate there. That says it all there. So, what belief did you hold early in your career that almost cost you long-term success, and how did you correct it?
I was a broke cowboy living in a 10 by 40 mobile home, and I thought I couldn't buy notes.
And once you figured that out, game over. Love
Yes,
it. When success started compounding for you, what did it cost you that you didn't anticipate?
You have to be prepared to scale. And I had opportunities to grow when I wasn't prepared for it. And particularly in areas of structure and accounting and all that stuff. And so I definitely have a caution flag. Don't try to grow too fast.
Love it. If everything reset tomorrow and you had to rebuild with your knowledge, but none of your current relationships, what would you refuse to waste time on again?
Well, I was going to say relationships would be the one thing I could lean on. So you've
Took
made
those away.
you
Yep.
made it a tough question, didn't you?
All right.
Yeah, I would know how to go find the right people to spend the time with. And when you're experimenting, you're figuring it out. I now have figured it out. I know who to go spend time with.
Eddie, there's a reason I removed relationship from that question, because my answer to that was go build relationships. So if I remove it and you answered it perfectly, go build relationships is what I'm hearing. So I love that. What mistake or loss still quietly shapes how you underwrite risk today?
Oh, wow. Junk property. I
Was
mean, if people, I'm telling you right now, good, honest people will not live in a neighborhood where their family is threatened. That's a great example. Like if they will go default on that loan to protect their family. And so I'm pretty tough about the property that secures that loan.
yeah. I like that. And like we talked about in the beginning, or you talked about, that's your buy box, right?
Yep.
You define it and stick to it. And any area that we've gotten in trouble lending is always when we go just outside of our guidelines, right? You just dip outside in the interest of scale, and you're getting a little bit of trouble. So if more investors understood one thing about money that they currently misunderstand, what would change in their financial lives?
Earning interest.
Okay. Care to elaborate?
Guarantee you that when you do the math on earning interest, you start completely changing how you think about money.
I love it. Eddie, it has been an absolute honor. Like I said, your reputation has been in my head for a while through the local Dealmaker group, and it's a pleasure for me to be the one to sit down and give you these questions and let you share. I mean, this is the tip of the iceberg, and I want to encourage everybody listening, if you don't do anything else, just go click on these links we're going to put in the show notes, and at least do some additional research into what Eddie offers through his. I mean, he's given us a free resource to get started, and then if that, again, makes you interested in moving further, he's got more resources, and I appreciate you sharing all that with us and joining me today, Eddie.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, you have a wonderful day. That wraps up this episode of the Dealmaker Catalyst. If you want to keep learning from elite operators and plug into a national community that lives this stuff every day, check out Dealmaker Catalyst. Make sure you subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who's serious about leveling up. And we'll see you on the next Dealmaker Catalyst.